Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. You're watching Alaska Weather, and thanks for joining us tonight. No matter what part of Alaska you're watching from, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather conditions and changes in the forecast. You can always do that by watching the show, but a good phone number to keep handy is 1-800-472-0391. Toll free anywhere across Alaska. It's the Alaska Weather Information Line. You can dial up our forecast that way if the web or using your phone or tablet isn't that easy. Take a look at the website, though, when you can. Weather.gov/Alaska is got everything official that we send out during the day, whether it's from the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center, the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit, all the folks that you talk to on the phone there to get your daily flight briefings. They put that information online for you as well. And if you can't find what you're looking for about this show or about anything else the National Weather Service does for you around Alaska, please let me know. I'm happy to help any way I can. David.Snider@NOAA.gov is how you find me. Winds are going to continue across the eastern Alaska range. If you've been moving through any areas around Delta Junction or into the Deltana and Tanana Flats region, generally north of Healy, you've probably run into some gusts in the last 24 hours. West of Delta Junction, we expect those gusts to be upwards of 60 to 65 miles per hour now, kind of pushing that threshold for warning level stuff, but we're not quite there yet. We don't think it's going to get that bad, but we do have a wind advisory out for the areas there in the eastern Alaska range. So if you're driving up and down the parks and heading toward Fairbanks, you may get into a little bit of that wind gust there. More likely you're going to find some of that across the Richardson Highway or some of the cutoffs there, the passes heading through the eastern Alaska range. Everything out across the west is wind and snow. The wind's not going to be quite as bad as what we have here in the eastern Alaska range, but we are going to add in some snow, which will bring down that visibility quite a bit. We're going to start in the southwest here, so generally from the Nushagak River and east, we expect to see about 2 to 4 inches of snow along the coast and about 4 to 8 inches of snow inland. That's quite a bit more there, so a lot more snow likely inland there, generally from the Nushagak River eastward. Now, we think that there is going to be some wind blowing through here as well, maybe wind gusts from the north and east up to about 35 miles per hour at their strongest. And as you move further northward, those snow amounts are going to come down quite a bit, but the wind is still going to be a factor. So as we get into the Yukon Delta, we expect the weather to gradually improve. Let's start with the Kuskokwim, actually. For the Kuskokwim Delta, we should see weather improving after tonight. We're looking for about 2 to 4 inches of snow, and that includes the Bethel region with gusts from 35 to 45 miles per hour. For the Yukon Delta, your weather will improve tomorrow. Look for 2 to 4 inches of snow before this winds down in the afternoon. For the eastern Norton Sound region, we expect about 2 to 4 inches of snow, also looking for some gusty winds, and weather should improve for you as we head into the afternoon, about 4 o'clock tomorrow for this winter weather advisory. For the lower Koyukuk Valley, 3 to 6 inches of snow is possible, so you're going to see a little bit more as you head northward up the Koyukuk and a little less wind, but your weather should improve afternoon tomorrow, probably after lunch. And then for the Bering Strait communities, the western end of the Seward Peninsula, and especially St. Lawrence Island, about 1 to 3 inches of snow is possible in your region. Your weather will start to improve later tonight and into tomorrow as well. So gradual improvement the further north you go, most likely running into some wind with some heavier amounts of snow, especially inland in the Bristol Bay region. Let's take a look at the satellite picture. And we've got a very broad area of low pressure sitting across the Gulf right now, but what's been happening is one wave moves in and another one forms to the south, and then that moves in. We have a very large area of low pressure in the upper atmosphere. You'll see this on the jet stream, but it pretty much carves out a very large track for these low pressure systems to flow along. And the eastern side of that, that's where we're dragging up a lot of this heat. So if you're warm in southeast today, considering opening the windows, enjoying the first, let's say, half afternoon of spring, the vernal equinox was around 1 o'clock today. You'll notice that conditions are going to be fairly warm, probably the same for you. Not a whole lot of rain getting caught up in this flow for you yet. We need that front to get a little bit closer, and it hasn't been doing that in southeast. But we've got a lot of clouds moving north and a lot of warm air spreading out and away from these low pressure systems. So as you watch this, you'll notice these clouds kind of fanning out everywhere. We do have another ribbon of fast moving air moving across the north slope, and that's pushing a lot of that heat into western Alaska. So a lot of changes there, and all because we have this huge area of low pressure carved out south of Alaska and into the Gulf of Alaska itself. The good thing is we are still bringing in some colder air across the Bering Strait communities down to about Nunivak Island, and we're still seeing some ice growth there, but it's probably not going to last a whole lot longer. High pressure sitting across eastern Asia now, 1,029 millibars. We got another low near the Kamchatka Peninsula, and our main low now south of Kodiak Island at about 960 millibars, with high pressure sitting out across western Canada at around 1,030 millibars. This is bringing in southerlies to most of the Gulf and periods of heavy rain around Whittier all the way down the Kenai Fjords coast, and then a little bit more of a moderate rain around Kodiak. Snow's falling across southwest and inland up the Koyukuk Valley. The Bering Strait seeing snow all the way down toward Dutch Harbor and Unalaska along the Alaska Peninsula. Some snow falling there. And then pockets of heavier rainfall moving out toward Atka this afternoon. As we look at the weather heading forward through tonight, the boundary that we saw sitting across south and western Alaska is going to shift just a little bit. This is going to gradually fall apart, but for right now, it is a focus for wind. You can see that channeling of the northerly wind coming down the western side of this, and then this low pressure boundary is a focusing mechanism for a little bit more enhanced precipitation. That means a better chance for rain and snow if you're anywhere near this, and this is where we're finding that boundary of likely about 4 to 6 inches there, especially inland and east of the Nushagak River. So watch for that again. If you're close to that around the Kuskokwim Delta and around the Bristol Bay community, you're probably going to get a little bit more snowfall. Around the northern and eastern Gulf, rain may try and work its way in from Sitka up toward the capital city, up toward Gustavus, Haines, and Skagway, and around to Yakutat. But notice the southern communities there in the southern panhandle don't look like you're going to be in prime position for at least any decent amounts of rain, and we know you need it there. Low pressure is going to push another front toward Kodiak Island. We're going to keep that northerly flow coming through the Bering Strait, and things should be generally dry for the north and western coast. But notice too, the pressure gradient here across the north slope is tightening up Thursday and again on Friday. That means the winds are going to come up, and blowing snow may be a little bit more possible for parts of the Beaufort Seacoast from Kaktovik all the way around the corner from Utqiagvik to Wainwright and maybe into the Bering Strait. So plan for that if you're thinking about moving around as we head Thursday, Friday, and into Saturday, maybe even Sunday. Warmer air is going to start to fall apart. It's been pushing out and away from this low pressure system, but this is cold up here, and it's trying to end that warmer air's advance. It is going to push colder air into western Canada, and the front that we saw moving across the Gulf is also weakening. All of this is trying to win, and nobody seems to be doing it right now. Southeastern Alaska, again, just kind of grazed by moisture moving in across the north and western parts of the region. Central and southern parts will see more clouds than any precipitation, unfortunately. And snow will continue across the west coast, but gradually, again, as we move northward, the weather should improve throughout the rest of the day. As we get into Friday, snow and blowing snow may be possible across the Chukchi Coast into the Kotzebue Sound region, down toward through the Bering Strait, and maybe even Norton Sound still getting grazed by that. Low pressure's moved into Bristol Bay at 975, and you can see this front is still hanging on, still trying to make rainfall near southeast, but really not focusing over any one particular area. And you can see another round of snow and rain trying to work its way in across parts of the central and western chain.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And on to your aviation weather now. We're going to see two waves of IFR, one of those developing around the center of low pressure out here across the Gulf, but the other extending northward, leading along a warm front boundary that's moving toward the Brooks Range, out toward the southwest coast, and into the Bering Strait. And another ribbon of IFR hovering out here across the western Aleutian. So here we go. Southeast starts off pretty good with VFR conditions there. A lot of VFR across the central and eastern interior into the Copper River Valley, and then across the northwest coast. But as we go throughout our day on Thursday, you're going to notice that main low starting to develop more IFR across the Kenai Fjords, up Cook Inlet, across the east-facing slopes of the western Brooks Range. The western sides look to see considerable improvement there thanks to the downsloping flow. And then IFR across Bristol Bay from Cape Newenham all the way down into the Alaska Peninsula. You can see most of the peninsula looks like IFR there. But VFR continues for most of southeast, most of the interior, the Tanana Valley, the upper Yukon, and the northwestern coast. Look for marginal conditions to continue around Kaktovik, the Pribilofs, Unalaska, Dutch Harbor, and westward along the chain. As we get into Friday morning, another wave of IFR, low ceilings, low vis, starts to move back into the Barren Islands. And again, the east-facing slopes of the western Brooks Range, the northern Gulf Coast, but still hovering away from a large part of southeast. Marginal conditions, though, are starting to fill in from the Lynn Canal down toward the Dixon entrance. And you'll see that first wave starting to work its way into Nome, St. Lawrence Island, and all the way down toward the eastern chain, including the Pribilofs for Friday morning. After that, we should get some improvement for the west coast. Marginal conditions linger there, but expect to see VFR starting to come back for southwest, the lower and upper AKwx Valley, and certainly the central and eastern parts of the interior. South Central, Prince William Sound especially looking at IFR, and then that band of IFR lingers offshore of southeast. That could open up some parts of the inside passage, but we're still talking about marginal levels kind of encroaching on that, so beware. That's going to be shifting around a little bit. Aktuvic and Adigan Pass probably push back toward marginal conditions, and we'll see marginal levels there across the central and eastern chain. Here's your pass conditions in detail now. IFR expected to lean over toward marginal weather as we get into Thursday for Aktuvic and Adigan Pass there. Look for IFR for Lake Clark and Merrill Pass. The western side probably looking at least MVFR to VFR conditions, but the eastern side a lot more likely to be IFR. Rainy Pass, IFR conditions expected through the pass. Same conditions follow there. Windy Pass, marginal to VFR trends are expected. We should see similar levels there in Isabel Pass as we go. Tenita Pass looks pretty good. Mentasta Pass, I should say, VFR there. Tenita does also look pretty good. VFR is expected throughout your Thursday. Portage Pass should see some minor improvements as the day goes on, and Chilkoot and White Pass go the other way, heading for marginal levels by the end of your Thursday there. And again, it looks like some changes there as we get into Friday morning, as we saw. For Thursday morning, a substantial amount of heat has been moving up southeast, the Alcan border, and into northwestern Canada there. We saw record heat yesterday across southeast and in those same places. No question about it, we're going to see unusually warm weather for today, maybe again for the record books, we'll find out. And then also for a large part of western Canada for Thursday afternoon. So plan on that. Freezing levels across south central, the eastern interior, and southwest, ranging between about 2,000 and 4,000 feet. The surface freezing line just about to St. Paul and St. George. Icing potential is pretty high up there, though, of course. North of the Brooks Range summits, we're looking at levels below 10,000 feet. Plenty of moisture, plenty of cold, no problem. You're going to see icing there. South of that, though, we expect to see levels that are much higher, anywhere from 6 to about 10,000 feet across west, southwest, south central, and hit and miss across southeast. But really, you're going to have to go way up there above 10,000 feet for any considerable icing. Low pressure right now is digging into the Bering Sea and into the Gulf. They're driving that weather maker with southerly winds coming into south central, 80 to 100 knots. Another southern extent of this jet is starting to pull off some of this power into western and southern parts of the lower 48 states. So what we're going to see is this low gradually become isolated here, and then the flow is going to reset a little bit and kind of cut out the Gulf. But that's several days off. Right now we've got deep southerly flow working in moisture across south central and southwestern Alaska and bringing that into southeast with plenty of heat. Wind speeds across the interior, 9,000 feet, hovering around 20 to 25 knots. A little bit slower here, 15 knots, but then you get into a faster flow across south central, 50 to 65 knots, and northwesterlies coming into the eastern Arctic at 20 knots with offshore flow for most of the west coast. So what does that mean for you in turbulence? It's going to be a bumpy ride over any of the ranges in southwest and south central Alaska, certainly along the coast below 6,000 feet. Considerable moderate in the western Brooks Range and over St. Lawrence Island below 4,000 feet, and at least a little bit of chop for some of the western islands, Nunivak, St. Paul, St. George, and the western chain.
Dual polarization technology is a major upgrade to the current radar system. It allows forecasters a better idea of what's actually out there and can help keep you safe.
Current radar technology transmits and receives information in the horizontal direction, which is very limited. Dual polarization technology, in addition to the horizontal, transmits and receives vertical energy, which allows forecasters to get information about the size, shape, and phase of the precipitation. We can use that information to better determine the precipitation type to expect at your given location.
There you have it. This new technology is currently being installed in radars across the country and is already being used by National Weather Service forecasters to produce better, more accurate forecasts. Learn more here and follow us. Want to know about the future of weather radar? Well, the National Severe Storms Lab has it here with its new phased array radar. Let's check it out.
It's a non-moving radar. It has 4 faces of the antenna, each pointing in different directions. One of the big advantages is that we're seeing so far, it can sample the area around the radar in less than a minute, maybe even a half a minute. And this is 5-6 times faster than what they can do today.
NSSL is leading the development of future weather radar with this project. Learn more here and follow us. The Storm Prediction Center is one of the NOAA weather partners. They are located in the National Weather Center in Norman, Oklahoma. Greg Carbon gives us a glimpse into what the SPC does.
Our mission is to analyze and forecast severe thunderstorms and the potential for tornadoes, large hail, and damaging winds from those thunderstorms across the lower 48 states, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. One of the primary missions of the Storm Prediction Center is the issuance of severe thunderstorm and tornado watches across the country when conditions appear to be coming together to support the development of severe thunderstorms and tornadoes.
The world-class meteorologists in the Storm Prediction Center specialize in severe weather and keeping you safe. Learn more here and follow us.
The National Severe Storms Lab is working on increasing the lead time for severe weather warnings. The national average for tornado warnings is currently 13 minutes, but more notice would be helpful, especially for those in charge of moving large groups to shelter. Warn on Forecast will help forecasters issue hazardous weather warnings earlier. The project will give them more info about the chances of strong winds, large hail, and even tornadoes.
Currently, warnings are created by forecasters looking at the atmosphere outside, understanding its volatility, and then comparing that to how they see the Doppler radar presenting what's going on inside thunderstorms. Warn on Forecast is an idea where we're going to take the massive amounts of satellite, radar, and surface data and stick them all into a very high resolution prediction model. And then by producing new forecasts every 15 or 20 minutes, the forecasters hopefully will be able to use that model to produce warnings that extend out to an hour.
Before the National Weather Service can use this tool, it must be developed and tested. One big challenge will be deciding how to get the model predictions to the forecasters.
I'm going to keep this one very low. I'm just adjusting the track.
These hazardous weather prediction models are going to produce a huge amount of output. And this fire hose of data is just too much for forecasters to handle in real time quickly. So in order to help deal with that, NSSL has developed a related project called Facets. And Facets is the methodology which will enable forecasters to focus very quickly on the most important threats.
Once Warn on Forecast and Facets are proven to be reliable and effective, then forecasters will be better able to inform you of threats nearby. Learn more here and follow us.
The Hazardous Weather Test Bed is located at the National Weather Center in Norman, Oklahoma. It is used for experiments that will allow forecasters to learn and apply new technologies.
The Hazardous Weather Test Bed is a really unique space throughout all of NOAA. And this is where the researchers and the operational folks come together in a common space to solve operational problems and to test new research tools that the research community is working on. The goal is to accelerate the transfer from research to operations of the newest tools and techniques.
People come from around the world to collaborate on this unique project.
We can bring together not only NOAA people, but also university people, faculty, researchers, private sector meteorologists, folks working in other countries in meteorology, forecasters can all come together and focus on what the problem of the day is with the forecasters.
Each spring, several experiments occur in the hazardous weather test bed. Learn more here and follow us.
What are you looking at? And what are you ignoring? Did you notice the NOAA logo in the corner? Forecasters have a lot of information in front of them too. Every second counts during severe weather, and decisions about where to focus are constantly being made. This could be even more challenging in the future. Phased array radar will produce 4 to 6 times more information than what we have now, which brings us to the question researchers are hoping to answer. Will more radar information affect forecasters' decisions?
From our past experiments, we've learned a lot about how forecasters think during the warning decision process, but we've also learned that those thought processes are very complex, and for that reason, we need a better way to be able to track forecasters' cognitive activity.
Inbounds and possibly golf ball sized hail.
An eye tracker is a piece of technology that is used to determine in real time where someone's eye gaze is located. And these eye trackers are typically video-based, which means a camera sits below a computer monitor, and with infrared light and vector analysis, we can determine where a person is looking and how their eyes are moving.
Eye tracking is already being used in the medical field and air traffic control. Using similar research methods, NSSL is discovering the benefit for weather forecasting too. Phased array radar will give forecasters a lot more to think about. Understanding their decision-making process will help researchers develop even more user-friendly tools. So what's the benefit for you? Even better weather warnings. To learn more, check us out online and follow us on Facebook and Twitter.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And back with your sea ice edge now. We'll continue to see growth pushing southward toward Nunivak Island and St. Matthew, but the additional gains are not going to be that large. Maybe another 30 nautical miles on top of what we already see. You'll notice high concentrations of ice all around Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island, and up through the Bering Strait. But remember, a lot of this does not have the deep winter thickness that we would like to see this time of the year. So be careful out among the ice, especially around southwest. And we also have a very narrow polynya here north and west of Point Lay up toward Wainwright and just around the corner to Utqiagvik. So be aware of that. You can always check the latest sea ice edge anytime. Weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. On to the winds and waves now. Over southeast, you see southeasterly flow pretty light across the Lynn Canal and Stevens Passage, but it picks up through the Dixon entrance and across the outer coast. 20 to 25, 11-foot seas, pretty common across the outer coast Thursday. That comes up even more to about 16 feet from Yakutat all the way down toward Craig. 30 to 35 knots coming in from the south and east, still holding on to some light winds and probably a lot of warmth across southeast as we wrap up the week after many record highs across the region the last several days, and Petersburg again today. Here's a look at Thursday in south central. Easterlies over Prince William Sound, 20 knots, 4-foot seas. Northeasterly winds strengthening as you move southward through Cook Inlet, 30 to 40 knots, 16-foot seas west of the Barrens, 18-foot seas east of the Barrens on that 40-knot flow, and a broad easterly flow sweeping across the Gulf around 30 to 40 knots. You'll see that picking up just a little bit more in the seas as we get into Friday. The winds don't change a lot. In fact, they might even get better. 19 to 20-foot seas, though, expected there as you head outside of Resurrection Bay and into the eastern Barrens. 18-foot seas west of the Barrens on a 40-knot wind, and northeasterly winds continue over Cook Inlet. And we still have some choppy, blustery weather across Prince William Sound, 30 knots and 7-foot seas there on Friday. In Bristol Bay, 25 knots, an easterly flow there, 6-foot seas, northeasterly winds down the Alaska Peninsula, and then here's that easterly flow wrapping into low pressure around Kodiak Island, 30 to 40 knots with seas up to 18 feet east of Akiak and Kodiak, 15 feet there as you head toward the Alaska Peninsula northeasterly. Still strong in Shelikof Strait, but the winds come up even more from the east as we get into Friday. 14-foot seas there, northerly south of Perryville and Sandpoint, and east and northeasterly flow continues in Bristol Bay, 6 to 7-foot seas expected there. Thursday, across the chain, north winds coming over the Pribilofs, 20 to 30 knot winds there with 13 to 14-foot seas expected. North and easterlies coming across the chain. anywhere 20 to 25 in most areas, a little bit stronger south of Unalaska and Dutch Harbor. As we get into Friday, you can see those higher waves start to wrap back into Nikolsky and Unalaska and outside of Dutch Harbor. 17 to 20 foot seas here, 35 to 40 knot winds, all blowing from the north and east on either side. Some of those higher seas making it through the gap between Atka and Nikolsky, of course. And then we get into a little bit more of a return flow feeding back up the western side of the Bering. So places like Kiska and Shemya will start to get into more of an easterly wind toward the end of the week with a 9-foot sea. Coming down the west coast, northerlies, still cold, still pushing that ice edge further and further south. Remember, we said about another 30 nautical miles maybe on top of what we already have. Around St. Paul and St. George up towards St. Matthew, 30 to 35 knots, 12 to 15 foot seas, and about 7 to 12 foot seas on either side of Nunivak Island. For Friday, the wind strengthened just a little bit more around St. Matthew. St. Paul, St. George, not a big change. 15 foot seas continue there, and we'll start to see a little bit more of an offshore flow around the Kuskokwim Delta, 30 knots with an 8-foot sea. On the north slope, northerlies coming in, 15 to 20 around the Beaufort Sea. East and northeasterlies coming down through the Chukchi coast, 20 to 35. And we expect to see the chance for some blowing snow developing, especially over the ice as we get into Friday and Saturday. The winds are coming up, 25 to 30 there from the east, and northeasterly winds over the Chukchi, 20 to 40 knots, the strongest of which will probably be around Point Hope to Cape Lisburne. Let's recap the weather as we see it tonight. Low pressure still sitting across the western Gulf. Looks like we still have a very broad area of low pressure in the upper atmosphere that's helping to dig out this unsettled region of weather across the Gulf. It's helping to send in a lot of warmth and moisture up through the Gulf, and some of that moisture is making it to southeast, but not a whole lot of rain chances, especially in southern southeast where we need the rain. It looks like a broad area of low pressure will sit across southwest, and that means winter weather advisories are hoisted for many western areas, including from regions from the Nushagak River eastward and then north along the Kuskokwim and Yukon Delta regions. For the Bristol Bay area, again, Nushagak River eastward and inland, 6 to 8 inches of snow is possible there. The weather will gradually improve as we get into Thursday, especially as you head north. Still looking for some minor accumulations, but wind's going to be the main factor here, so limiting visibility there with a gust up to 25 and 35 miles per hour. Watch for the wind to come up across the north slope as we head toward the weekend, reducing visibility, even though it's not going to snow a whole lot across the eastern coast.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.